These blocks have given birth to New Yorkers from all walks of life. They contain apartments, classrooms, and workplaces. They are a destination for people from across America and around the world.
Wealthy, middle class, and poor. Black, white, and brown. The famous, the familiar, the unknown.
These blocks have supported the development of some of the most important institutions in history. They have also stimulated resistance to lies and injustice, both foreign and domestic.
Major scientific discoveries, social innovations, and works of art, all developed here in Morningside Heights.
These blocks have been tough and tender, merciful and mean, contested and collaborative.
Esta cuadra es nuestra casa. This block is our home.
These blocks are 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 our home.
We're very glad that you're here this evening, and we're happy to see you, and we hope that you're nice and warm. And one of the benefits of this is that we didn't have to go outside. Anyway, like to say that we're so glad to see so many of our friends here this evening. I know that more people will be joining us. And I want to say that it's been a hard year. It's been a year of so many things thrown at us, and yet we are still here, we are still persevering, and we will not let this stop us. I want to say that we're somewhat uplifted by the fact that we now have a new president. We have the vaccine, which I hope many people are availing themselves of and will avail themselves of as we get more and more doses here in the city and more places open up. And I know that we have people working on that all over the place. But I can't wait to see everybody in person. I really can. I don't mind going out in the cold if I get to see you guys. Shake hands, give a hug. So anyway, that's going to happen, and the end is in sight. And so I think that's the important thing to hold on to. I want to just tell you a little bit about us very briefly. And you can get more about us and the work that we're doing in more detail on our website, which is in the chat. And it's MHCCNYC.org. And we have all sorts of great information there. We were formed in 2016, and we formed because there was the beginnings of a great deal of luxury housing coming online. And we really needed to try and organize to do what we could to make sure that the needs of our community were met, and to try and stop it where we could, or to try and get some benefit from it. And that's what started us off. Our three main priorities for this organization are limiting luxury overdevelopment in our neighborhood, promoting local affordable housing, real affordable housing, and preserving the unique character and quality of life here in Morningside Heights, because this is one of the great gems of this city. Along the way, we've also had other involvements, and we're going to be discussing those in more detail later on in different ways. The format tonight is something that we haven't tried before. We're going to go into breakout rooms. We felt if we did breakout rooms, we would be able to have more discussion, and particularly about the things that you were personally interested in. And we're going to walk you through that process, so don't flip out. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to have some updates about what we've been working on so that we don't have to go over that when you get into the breakout rooms. We can begin to hear from you and get your ideas and see where you'd like this organization to be going at with the priorities that you have for us in the Heights. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Robert Stern. He's a member of our executive committee, and he's going to be talking tonight about rezoning, historic preservation, McGiffert Hall, and the health and safety. And again, it's a brief presentation, but we want you to have that overview. Robert?
Hi, everyone. I'm Robert Stern. I wanted to briefly go over some of the community-led initiatives that we've been doing for quite a while. And when we're in the breakout room, we can go into more detail. And then I'd like from you to understand what actions we should be taking, how you can help, and some of the takeaways you've learned tonight. So we're going to be covering a little bit of the rezoning plan, the saving of McGiffert Hall, the phase 2 of historic preservation, we've done phase 1, and construction, health, and safety. So many of you know that we've been doing the rezoning plan for quite a while. The objectives are to promote affordable housing. We want to eliminate as of right zoning. That means developers can pretty much do what they want. Morningside Heights is long overdue. The other areas around our neighborhood are already rezoned. Primary goal is to sustain all the rent stabilized units in the area. We also want to limit tall luxury towers, and by doing so, we will be imposing height caps. We want to make sure that we have a say in what developers decide to do, and working with the city as well. We want to foster greater small business activity, and that would be through commercial rezoning. We want to preserve the unique character of Morningside Heights. That's a primary goal of our organization. And with a community-led plan working closely with City Council and our local electeds, we feel this is a win-win for the city and for the neighborhood. And by doing so, we want to create this sort of bottoms-up approach to rezoning as a model for other communities. So this is an actual map from the rezoning plan, and it emphasizes the protection of rent-stabilized units. There are about 3,000 rent-stabilized units in Morningside Heights. In this particular diagram, we're showing in the top corner, the pink portion, where units are particularly vulnerable, and we need to focus on rezoning that area to preserve those units. During the period of 2007 to 2017, we've lost a significant number of rent-stabilized units, as you can see perhaps by the slide here. In the bottom left-hand corner is the current historic district, which provides some protections. Folks, but if we do nothing, all we will have is tall towers. In the next few years, all of the new developments, which we estimate around 630 apartments across 4 different developments, all of them luxury condos or luxury rentals, not one affordable unit. The next steps are we need to do an environmental assessment statement. We need to discuss the plan again with Morningside Heights. We've discussed it with you to some degree, but we need to socialize it more. And then becomes the final zoning plan submission to city planning, the borough president, et cetera, and then final vote at city council. We had funding for the environmental assessment statement. Unfortunately, it went away because of COVID constraints on budget, but we have an alternative path, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the breakout session. The next step is historic preservation of individual landmarks. So McGiffert Hall is not landmarked, and we have filed with the Landmarks Preservation Commission to landmark McGiffert. We feel it's quite vulnerable. It was recently purchased by Riverside Church, and we frankly don't know quite what they're going to do with it. We've had meetings with them and trying to understand what their plans are. You can see McGiffert here on this overhead diagram across the street from Union Theological Seminary. The red dot shows a site at Union Theological Seminary. You can see the tower there, which is landmarked, but the part of the building next to it is not landmarked. Well, what happened there? Well, they sold that to a developer, and that's what it looks like now. And there's another shot. And this is what's coming, a 40-story, all-luxury condominium tower. Here, JTS, Jewish Theological Seminary, sold land and air rights to a developer. And as you can see, we have the nearly completed Savannah 34-story, all-luxury condo. In the same deal, Jewish Theological Seminary sold the building on 120th Street. This should have been preserved and would be preserved in the historic designation phase 2, but unfortunately it was demolished, and here's what stands there today, nearly completed. Here are diagrams of the projected historic district phase 2. These have been submitted to Landmarks Preservation in a request for evaluation. On the left, you see the current historic district designation. On the right, Morningside Heights Historic District Extension. And here are the other areas. These are aggregates of buildings that have historic significance that should be designated historic areas. And there on the left is the northern portion of Morningside Heights Historic District, which will also work to preserve rent stabilized units. And another area that we've been working on, many of you who are familiar with what we do, is construction, health, and safety. With all the construction going on, we need someone to observe the protocols for construction, not only by construction workers, but how it impacts pedestrians in our area and how it impacts the environment. Here we see a construction worker who works for Gilbane. This was at the Savannah site, dumping toxic cement into a sewer. That's an EPA violation. Here we see trucks going the wrong way down a one-way street in a school zone through a red light. So this happens quite frequently. And in the breakout room, I'm going to be asking you to be the eyes and ears of our organization and see how much perhaps you can help us out. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much, Robert. That was wonderful. Now I'm introducing Dave Robinson. He's a member of our executive committee as well. And he is going to be speaking about affordable housing and the work that we are doing around that issue, as well as the issues of COVID in our community. So Dave Robinson.
Thanks very much, Laura, and thanks really to everybody who has joined tonight. We really appreciate your being here. I first want to just mention what we've done about the COVID crisis. We can't solve the crisis ourselves. What we've really tried to do in the community is stop community spread by limiting the influx of students. We did this over the summer in anticipation of the fall. We did this in the late fall and early winter in anticipation of the return of students in the winter. We made a campaign with Columbia. We wrote to President Bollinger, to the President of Barnard as well. We got press coverage, community members wrote, our elected officials supported us. In the fall, we succeeded in limiting the influx of students. In the spring, we were less successful, about double the number of students as in the fall are coming back. We've continued to advocate that that not happen, but so far we haven't been successful. We encourage people to monitor what Columbia is going on your screen. There is a link to report safety violations by Columbia affiliates. And we're hoping that that will result in remedies to make the situation better. We're hoping that this is a limited crisis, and after the next few months, we'll be able to move on to the other issues for the long-term benefit of our community. The second topic I want to discuss is affordable housing. Robert alluded to many aspects of the affordable housing issue, and there are many aspects, and we can't work on them all. The one we've chosen to focus on is a one to try to make Columbia University and the other institutions, but especially Columbia, more responsive to the need for affordable housing in the community. And there is a resource that is potentially available to do that. Columbia owns a lot of private, formerly full of all private buildings, formerly full entirely of rent regulated, that is rent stabilized and rent controlled tenants, which provided a long-term housing resource for the community. What happens instead when a tenant moves out or dies, the apartment goes back to Columbia and our community loses precious resources. There are several hundred units left. MHCC and Community Board 9 together will be working to try to convince Columbia to change its policy to make those apartments a permanent affordable housing resource for the community. We could talk more about how to do that and how to work on other affordable housing issues in the breakout room to start in just a few minutes.
Thank you very much, Dave. That was great. And again, for more input and more details, please go to the breakout room that Dave is running on affordable housing and COVID. Harry Schwartz, another community member, is going to start talking about the Morningside Heights Community Fund.
Thank you, Laura. A pleasure, and welcome everyone to our open meeting. The Morningside Heights Community Fund is, I think, one of our major initiatives. It was established with contributions from institutions and developers who have harmed our neighborhood by their development, meaning, for example, pressure on public services and pressure on the housing supply. So we persuaded them to contribute to the fund. Essentially, the main purpose of the fund is to maintain and preserve civic life in this neighborhood, represented by all the organizations that provide services here. So this is especially important in this era of COVID, when our civic life has become fractured and frayed. So we are here at the right time. We are doing this in partnership with the New York Community Trust, a major charity in the New York area. The funds are deposited with the trust. We make recommendations to the trust for groups that should be funded. They administer it, disperse the funds, gather reports, and vet them. So we do this in cooperation with the fund. So what have we done so far with the fund? Last summer, we gave out what you might say were emergency grants to 9 organizations. Each got $5,000. Much of it centered around the response to COVID. This went to food banks, wellness organizations, literacy groups. So that money is already being used by organizations. They may not be located in the Heights, but they serve the Heights. We've just completed the work on round 2 of the MHCF grants. We received 24 proposals for funds from the fund. This was almost 5 times the amount of money we had available. So we had to do some careful pruning and evaluation. So we are in the process now of offering 12 of these organizations additional money, be a total of $100,000 that's going to go for services in Morningside Heights. Again, there's a strong bias towards COVID. These groups provide food pantries, services for seniors, literacy, education, work in the schools. So those funds will actually be received maybe in a month or 2. We're now contemplating a 3rd round. That'll be this summer. And we will probably have about $100,000 more to distribute. And we will be soliciting proposals maybe in June or so. And I'll be at the 3rd breakout room, but if any of you have ideas on groups that you know that might want to apply for the funds or areas that we should be looking into, but the RFP went to 80 organizations. So our net is very wide in terms of trying to capture groups. So if you're interested in the fund, see you in the 3rd breakout room.
Thank you very much, Harry. And moving right along, we are going to hear from Andrea Brecker, who's going to share her screen with us and make a presentation briefly about the survey that many of you participated in with some of the results.
Okay, I want to thank everyone who participated in the recent survey. I know it's a busy time. We get a lot of emails, lots of news, and I really appreciate your participation. I'm going to review some of the key findings from the survey, but the whole report will be posted on the MHCC website so you can read all the details. We focused on two things for this survey. One was in reference to the upcoming elections in November for the New York City election, different positions. And it's the issues that MHCC has been focusing on that are particularly important, which includes rezoning, COVID, affordable housing, and support for local businesses. Other things that are important are quality of life types of issues, transportation, street traffic, public transportation, schools, crime prevention, and police reform. Most of the people who took us a recent survey feel it's not appropriate to have increased the number of students on the campus. We asked, why do you feel that way? And this, we collected verbatim statements. You could read them all in the report, but they focused on concern about the spread of COVID, adherence to safety protocol, and whether or not they're in favor of the schools opening. It's important that students adhere to the protocol. Here's a sample of some of the verbatim comments. The feeling that we're just not ready to increase the student population. People have concern about their family health. And it's been cited that students, they observe some students who don't observe the protocol when they're off campus. And in particular, it was remembered that there was an incident with students in the master's program taking a vacation at the height of when COVID was really spreading. And this is the last slide, which shows that, of course, you know, now that we have the vaccination, hopefully the availability will increase, but certainly people want to get the COVID vaccination. Thank you.
Andrea, thank you. That was a good presentation. And for more information, all the results of the survey will be printed in the on our website. I just want to say hi to Eric Coelho. Eric is works for City Council member Mark Levine, and he has been wonderful for many of you who have contacted us about problems in the community. And Eric has been the guy who has found the agencies and dealt with the problems. So thank you, Eric, so much. And thank you, Mark Levine's office, Councilmember Mark Levine, for being right there and available to us. I also would like to recognize our Community Board 9 Chair, Barry Weinberg.
The Community Board is very happy to continue to work very, very closely with MHCC on a variety of issues, especially the rezoning and the efforts to increase the number of affordable units, as Dave mentioned. But especially for the past several weeks, we have been consumed with pushing the health department and the city's new vaccine command center to open up vaccine sites in Community Board 9. There are currently no public sites in Board 9. In Morningside Heights and Manhattan or Hamilton Heights, we would like 1 to 2 sites per neighborhood. So we met with the Vaccine Command Center today, finally, and we are working to bring those vaccine sites to the Heights and our other neighborhoods. But in the meantime, we will continue to work very closely with MHCC on this, on the rezoning, and on any other issue that comes up that confronts the Heights.
You know, Barry, thank you so much. It's under your leadership that we feel that the Community Board is so responsive to the needs of Morningside Heights, and we really welcome and appreciate working with Community Board 9. It is a wonderful, wonderful collaboration.
Well, we are happy to have you as partners.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, now we are going to try and do these breakout rooms.
Okay, everyone is back now, Laura. So
okay, hello, welcome. I hear there was very good discussion that occurred in the groups, and thank you for returning. And I think what was interesting was that we had almost an equal spread between the 3 rooms, and that made for hopefully very good conversation. What we're going to do now is we're going to hear the headlines. Now, I don't know if people had a chance to even get to that point in the discussion, but maybe if we could have one person speak from room 1, which was about real estate, just 1 minute on the salient points that were discussed. Robert, are you there?
Sure. Yes, I'm here. So Alain was designated as a spokesperson. We focused mainly, given the short time, on how we might socialize some of these initiatives within the community. And I think people came up with some very good ideas. Alain, you want to give out the headlines, what we should be doing?
Yeah, hold on. I mean,
You have to unmute, Alain.
Alan, A-L-L-Y-N.
Okay, Alan. Okay.
I need to be unmuted. Yeah, so basically 3 topics along that. One was, how do we socialize more the zoning plan? And so we talked about talking to the real estate management companies to be able to present at the annual board meetings of the different co-op buildings and condos in the area. Another was using Nextdoor to reach out, digitally to people in the neighborhood. Another was creating a stand on the street, on a street corner at a certain time for people to stop by and see the plans. And then also maybe distributing flyers in the outdoor restaurant areas in the region as well.
What a great
So
idea.
that was in that. The second topic was about McGifford Hall and the concerns about, we're not clear really what Riverside Church's plans are for that space. And so therefore, trying to look for any contacts that we may have with the powers that be at Riverside to get a better understanding of what those plans are. And so there was one member that knew some people on some of the committees, the social justice committee, so they're going to reach out there. And then thirdly, Robert just reiterated the importance of citizen activism in terms of the construction sites that are going on, like Vanderwater. There's one in Claremont. There's also the Columbia site at 125th. Everybody be eyes and ears looking out for, code violations, safety violations, issues that, we can document and that we can raise to the appropriate authorities so that action can be taken.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very succinct. I just want to say that we were joined by Patrice Harrington from the Riverside Church. She's on the church council, and we're so happy that she came by. So I'm going to move on to room 2 headlines. That was the room on affordable housing and COVID. David.
Okay, well, Jeremy's going to do the summary. The one thing I wanted to say is it was great. We had several people who had not been to MHCC meetings before, and we were able to get their input, and it's great. And I want to say to everybody else who hasn't been to a meeting before, welcome, and we really look forward to meeting you in person when the mistakes we make will not be technology, but other things. So thank you. Jeremy?
Yeah. This isn't really organized. It's just sort of notes. And our group was more focused on identifying people's current concerns rather than coming up with solutions to anything or proposals for anything. One thing that was, interesting in our group is that there are a number of people in our group who have lived in this neighborhood for a very long time. And so they, have a certain perspective that shorter term residents don't have. For example, that even people who are already in lower income or more affordable housing are being adversely affected by the luxury buildings that are going up in the neighborhood. For example, in Morningside Gardens, it affects the costs of things, it affects rents and so on. So the mere fact that these things are going up is actually creating pressure on people who currently live here. A number of people are concerned about just understanding more about affordable housing, as well as what other people are doing about it. And somebody in our group said that we should check out the Low Income Housing National Organization, which has would know about efforts that are going on at state and national levels, because if we want to have an impact about it, we should connect, it should be not only us, but connect with and be aware of what's going on at the state level and the national level. And I wrote down low income housing. She said, look it up on the web, but do you want to give any more information about that? Who was it who said that? Oh, I know. It was Abramovitz.
Yeah, yeah, I don't want to take too much time. It's a low income housing the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And I would just say that they are dealing with this problem nationwide, which it is, and they probably have links to all sorts of other groups that are, but there may be, I'm sure in New York City, there are groups in New York City and New York State who are dealing more locally. And since the rules and regulations, the income limits and who can is eligible and so on is made by, not by the developers, but often by the local, state, or federal government, that's what needs to be changed, and therefore we have to find out who's working on changing them. It's at least one route in addition to whatever else we do locally with the developers.
Dave told us that he spoke to a developer who said, we are building affordable housing. It's affordable housing for millionaires. So that was a useful insight. Also, we discussed some quality of life issues. For example, there's certain areas where, for example, in front of West Side Market, fire engines, police cars are parking just to park and use in the bus stop. How can you get immediate action about these kinds of things, especially if there are violations being committed by the police? So anyway, there was a focus on, how can you get quicker impact on issues of concern. And Dave, am I leaving anything out?
Dave, you're muted.
Dave.
Where's Dave?
I'm here.
Oh yeah.
One of the major things is we did, Tom Kapner was part of our group and reiterated the importance of the apartments in Columbia buildings that we do want to do some focus on. I think the one thing that came through in our group was how vast a area dealing with affordable housing is. We're a small neighborhood group, and this, I think, is an area that I think we can focus on, plan to work with the community board, and we'll be looking for a lot of your support.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Someone else said I'm concerned about affordable housing, not just for me, but in general for other people.
Right.
Right. Jeremy, thank you for that report.
Sure.
We're moving on to Andrea and the group that dealt with other issues in the community, the quality of life up here.
Yes, it was Douglas will be able to give us a recap.
Douglas, are you there?
Hi, everybody. I'm Doug. I don't know many of you. Actually, I do know Robert and several of you. I'm glad to see you, although I haven't been formally involved. But I just took some notes during our meeting. We divided into 3 general areas of concern. One was trash. So there were a lot of discussion about the need to increase cleanliness. Public trash baskets are overflowing. Sometimes merchants do not clean their own frontage. There was some thought about Riverside and Broadway being problems. Some of the solutions that were discussed was more actively participating in neighborhood cleanups, actually requesting merchants to contact and contacting Eric and Mark Levine's office and actually pointing out a specific corner trash and say, this might need more frequent pickup from sanitation. So those were, and there was also some concern about the street sweepers not coming. So those were some of the trash topics that we mentioned. The other area was merchants. We were talking about how everybody loves Bob at Columbia Housewares, but no, but the general thought was to have ways to get merchants more involved. And it turns out that MHCC is doing that. And the city is also interested. But there were many ideas about trying to get merchants more involved in cleanliness, but also in preserving the character with places like Mondell's and West Side Market and and Columbia House Squares, which I think is the name of Bob's. And then we had a third bucket was general quality of life issues. So there was talk about rat infestation, too much automotive presence and noise, ways to perhaps reclaim some street space from traffic. And someone mentioned a group called Serenity, which is trying to lobby for more quiet and against things like sirens and car alarms. So those were, I think, some of our concerns. I'm sure I missed some. Did you want to add some things? Does anybody want to add?
Andrea, did you feel there was anything missed or?
No, I think that's pretty much what was covered. Yeah.
Working with the Riverside Park Conservancy.
Yes.
Was mentioned too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, you know, it sounds amazing. It sounds like so much was covered. Things were issues were identified. Some solutions were proposed. It gives us a real sense of where we need to go and what we need to focus on. And so thank you to everybody for their input and participation in this. This is how we hope to move our organization forward on the issues that concern those of us who live in this community or work here or just function in general in this area through organization or religious institution. I want to say now that we're going to open the floor for a few minutes so that we can answer any questions that weren't answered in your particular group that you want to hear about, or a comment that you want to make. We're limiting people to 1 minute just because we're running late due to technical difficulties, which were our fault. But anyway, we want to, if anybody would like to, you need to say, I want to speak, or I have a question in the chat so that we can find you and ask you to unmute. So we're not on, maybe it would be helpful if we could get onto a gallery view. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on gallery view now.
Okay, great. Okay. So, if you raise your hand or say anything, otherwise we can move along.
People are raising.
Hold on, we got David over here.
Okay, great.
David Vassar. Unmute yourself, David.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, in our breakout session, which I really enjoyed, I'm a cyclist in this town, and I'm really lucky to get around town that way. But for me, the traffic on our streets and avenues is just horrendous. And cyclists and e-bikers who take to the sidewalks often, I think, are just trying to, save their own lives. I mean, there's a lot of there's massive trucks, buses, everything on our avenues. I'm not sure how to put out this appeal, but I would say, if you're a car owner, but if you might want to, if you could think about car share rather than individual car ownership. I mean, we just have so many automobiles on our streets, and many of them are parked and basically what is public space, our streets and avenues. So let's try to agitate for keeping the bike lanes clear, at least, so old guys like me can cycle relatively safely and get around. And if you haven't biked in this town, I totally recommend it. It's not that hard, but you got to watch out. But let's make it safer out there.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Other people?
We have a chat from the comments as well.
Okay. I don't know.
Do you want me to just read it out for you?
Yeah.
How do you get rid of as is right and not allow the destruction of rent stabilized buildings? So how do we keep the rent stabilized buildings?
Well, okay, so yeah, I'll try to answer that. I mean, we keep the rent stabilized buildings by two of the initiatives we have. One would be rezoning. So we put disincentives really for developing them. Right now, as of right, developers can combine both land and air rights and use the floor area not to build out, but to build up. As you see on, let's say, Billionaires Row, these super talls, what they did was combine a number of lots And rather than build normal sized buildings, they build up in order to create luxury views that they can charge sky high prices. So there's that aspect. And then there's the historic designation that would also work towards preserving the existing housing there. At the same time, we want to make sure that some areas are developed that will provide affordable housing. But again, putting a height cap limit on some of these developments. And again, if we do nothing, all we will get are luxury towers, and those are inevitable in the areas which we consider vulnerable.
Let me just add to that a little bit. The most important thing to save rent stabilized housing is strong rent stabilization laws and tenant displacement, tenant organizing against displacement and legal services for tenants in rent stabilized buildings, all of which there are. This isn't necessarily our area, but there are organizations around the city and around the state that have worked really hard, changed the nature of the legislature to strengthen the laws, and the tenants are much more protected than they were. The other thing we did was, as an organization, was to help fund anti-displacement work by Palante Harlem, which is working in our neighborhood and in the West Harlem and Central Harlem area to work with tenants against landlord abuse to make sure that they can stay in their homes.
Okay, we have some other questions. Hob and Chai, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. So we've sort of been feeling the absence of the fairway at 125th Street pretty heavily. I wonder if there's anything that could be done to encourage like a similar type of grocery store to re-enter the area.
I'm gonna answer that. When D'Agostino's closed, Danny O'Donnell, our assembly member, went to Trader Joe's and asked them to come into that space. And they said it was not big enough for them. But I'm wondering now if one of our local elected officials couldn't approach either Trader Joe's or somebody to come in to use that space. Apparently, the valuable part of that space is the parking lot, believe it or not, not the building. So
Fairway owns that parking lot.
yeah. So it's well, anyway, so I think that that's a great suggestion, and we should really try and move on that. Try and get somebody, or at least find out what's going on.
Wegmans.
Susan Crawford had her hand up.
Yes, thank you. Just going backwards from that comment, I asked the manager, what? I asked the manager of Westside Market recently. I said, I'm sorry, I couldn't find you in time. Could you have bought Fairway? And he said, we actually talked to them, but they were so over leveraged and that it just wasn't feasible. It would have cost too much to try to buy them in a way that would have mitigated their debt. And also the parking lot, I think, has been sold separately, which is going to be a problem. Now, my questions are about Columbia. Will they always kind of have this iron fist over the neighborhood in terms of what can and cannot be developed? Or with all the work you've done, has that been somewhat mitigated? And another concern I have, especially in my own building, is how our current owners just take the family-sized apartments and turn them basically into Columbia dorms. It's heartbreaking what they're doing to our apartments. And if there are no families in the neighborhood, what's the neighborhood going to be 20 to 40 years from now?
Absolutely. Great question, Susan. Robert, do you want to take on the Columbia piece, or Dave?
Well, I think Dave is his initiative really on affordable units with Columbia is so on point. I think he should talk about that.
Dave, you're muted.
I think what we're trying to do with Columbia, I think in general, we work, we started out working with, against, I guess you could say, the other institutions in the neighborhood, and it all seems to come back to Columbia on so many different issues that they dominate our neighborhood, and the balance of power in the neighborhood, as well pointed out, is is not the way that it should be. The issue that we're really trying to work on that we think is a manageable issue is the apartments in Columbia that are still rent regulated, still occupied by long-term residents of the neighborhood. And because of the nature of the housing, really, they tend to be older residents. And until we get a hold of those, until we get a hold of a change in Columbia's policy, we're going to just keep losing those apartments one by one by one. The other half of the initiative we're trying to do, which the community board under Barry's leadership is also working on, is to try to get, when the institutions build new housing, which they do, they build it simply for people who are affiliated with the university. And we want a certain portion of that housing to be set aside for people in the community at affordable rents.
I just want to add, unlike the other institutions, UTS and JTS, who are looking for windfalls from real estate sales, Columbia only builds for itself. So we have that issue. They're not building necessarily luxury towers to sell at the highest price. They would only build to house faculty and students. It's not quite the same thing, but sometimes the results are the same, where they break up apartments, where they keep apartments for affiliates only. And Dave's initiative, which is really, I think, is going to have some momentum here, is to ensure that they designate those apartments in perpetuity as stabilized apartments for non-affiliates as well.
Is it possible to get them to not break the apartments up any further or turn them into, remove, you know, all the things that make them family apartments and just turn them into dorm rooms?
They really are supposed to be somebody, you know, a tenant organization. Have you contacted Goddard Riverside to try to do something about it?
Susan, you're muted. Susan, Ryan, can Susan be unmuted?
There she is.
Okay.
I have not gotten in touch with Goddard.
Yeah,
Riverside.
because, you know, a rent stabilized apartment, when it becomes vacant, is supposed to go to another tenant to stay under rent stabilization at the same rent. So it's a matter of getting those laws enforced.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good to know. Okay.
You know, the other thing, I just want to say this about Columbia and all of the institutions up here. The thing that has allowed us to progress to the point where we are, and believe me, we know that we have not nearly won on many, many issues, but we have made a difference. And that's because we are an organization. We are not just Laura Friedman or randomly Susan or randomly, you know, Marie. We are an actual organization, and they have to meet with us because we have brought all of us, not just, you know, some of us, but all of us to bear in our neighborhood. And that has made a difference, has made a huge difference. I've lived up here for 45 years. Columbia is the 800-pound gorilla, and we know that. And so we know that we have to organize, and that is what has made a difference, at least in getting us into the door to the table. We might have had to bring our own folding chairs, as Shirley Chisholm used to say, but we got there. Robert is our last speaker who has raised his hand, and I think after that we're gonna close out. So Robert.
Laura, sorry for interrupting. There's some folks in the chat who also have some comments. At least two people.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry.
Carolyn and Betsy. There may be others.
Okay, so we'll take Betsy next, and then Carolyn.
And then we have Stephanie as well.
And Stephanie. Okay, and we're going to wrap it up in 5 minutes, guys. So really, let's try and be succinct. Okay, so the next person is Robert. Bob Abramowitz.
Okay, hi. We haven't said much about COVID and the students. What I'm wondering about is Columbia been pressed to have a really consistent, systematic testing of students since they're coming from so many different areas. What are the requirements? Because testing is the only way to know about the risk of intense community spread.
Okay, Dave, you want to just talk about that briefly?
Did require people in the beginning of the semester to be tested. They called it gateway testing, I think it was. And then they say they test the people living in the dorms twice a week, which is good for COVID. And then there's random testing of other people. I think the two things we're concerned about with Columbian testing are, one, the fact that they're not providing testing for people in the community. You can go to Manhattan School of Music and get tested. You can go to city testing sites, but Columbia should have some testing for people in the community. Obviously, there should be Barry's working on vaccine areas. The second thing is Columbia does not discourages affiliates who are showing symptoms of COVID from coming in for testing, which means that those people are, they have sort of an artificial low positivity rate, which we're very suspicious of. And they also send those people that are sick to city testing sites and those people are potentially infecting other people waiting in line at those sites. So those are the concerns we have with Columbia. They claim to be trying. You look at their website, they have lots of epidemiological recommendations, but we think they can do better.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to Beth. You should go to their website and see if you can find their epidemiology. Good luck.
I just want to make the point that we were very effective, we feel, in the first round with a letter writing campaign from the community, because also included in our membership base are affiliates with Columbia, retired professors, et cetera, who were very concerned about students' return and wrote directly to Bollinger. And we feel that, along with some of the other universities also reversing their decisions, was very effective in the first round. They've improved their protocols. We met with them, and we've made them aware that they weren't communicating sufficiently with the community, and they've posted additional signs and contact information so that people can report when students are not following protocols. They do test, but not sufficiently. Twice a week is not enough, but it's better than it was. So they have improved, and I think it's partly to do because of community pressure.
Yeah. Okay, Betsy, briefly?
Yes, we were talking about affordable housing programs and whatnot, and I live in a housing development fund corporation, and I know a lot of the buildings in the area are used up. There aren't too many locations anymore in the Upper West Side area here, our neighborhood, where there's probably buildings available for that program. But I imagine a lot of you live in HDFCs or something, because we were talking about how, to find affordable housing, and our building's affordable housing, except that we, the shareholders, run the building, even though we have a managing agent. And I've been here, I bought in '82, but I've lived here since '73. So this is my home. So anyway, I just wanted to mention HDFCs because we were talking about that in one of the forums, and it's affordable housing through the HPD and through the city. We bought our building really inexpensively through the city program. I'm not sure where that is, but there's a lot of information about HDFCs or housing.
Yeah, and Community Board 9, thank you, Betsy.
Barry?
Community Board 9 is working on that issue quite a bit. Barry,
Yeah,
you're muted.
I went to a meeting. We've been discussing it because of the rules and regulations, being a housing development fund.
Barry, do you want to weigh in on this?
Barry, you're muted.
I just gave him permission to unmute.
Right, there we go. All right. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, Betsy. And in fact, I know that there is an HDFC coalition forum coming up. The HDFC coalition is, as many folks know, a coalition of these buildings, which were mostly formed when the city foreclosed on buildings where the landlord had stopped paying the rent and taxes, mostly in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And rather than run the buildings themselves, the city wanted to sell them to developers for $1 basically. And tenants said, many tenants said, no, like, if you're going to sell the building, sell it to us so we can be a co-op. And so the city sold these buildings, which were effectively negative assets. They were worth less than the money it kept to kind of keep the lights on. And these tenants really turned them around and turned their neighborhoods around in part of doing so. And so HDFCs are a huge portion of the affordable housing in our district. And Community Board 9 has the highest concentration of HDFCs out of any community board in the city. So the coalition was both started in CB9 and then revived by CB9 when this new regulatory agreement proposal happened. So it is a really important thing, but there are far fewer buildings entering HDFC hood, so to speak, now, as foreclosures by the city have dropped dramatically with the increase in real estate values.
Thank you, Barry. Stephanie, do you still want to speak? It looks like you're frozen. Ryan, can you unmute Stephanie? There you go.
Actually, one of the things we didn't talk about is handicapped individuals or people who have mobility issues.
The neighborhood's not compliant.
And the neighborhood is not compliant with this particular issue. I have a mother who's senior. She does have mobility issues. Our elevator was out for 6 months and there was no compensation or really help for her to get groceries, to get out. She couldn't go to appointments. It was significant. And they've redone the elevator to the point where you can't fit a wheelchair in there if you need it. So if there is, say she needs a stretcher, God forbid, they won't be able to fit a stretcher in that elevator without standing it up.
Or we don't have the appropriate.
We don't have the appropriate steps or lights to cross the street, my mother said. But the thing about, I wanted to comment about the bicycles. Yeah, it would be great if people would stay out of the bike lanes, but it also would be great if there was some regulatory laws for bicyclers. They run red lights, practically run over people. And in our neighborhood, a lot of times it's delivery men, but you can't walk down the street without worrying about getting hit by a bike before you worry about getting hit by a car. So it would be nice to be able to, you know, co-own cars, as the young man who I don't know where he went said. But the truth is, it's not even so much the cars as it is these bikes. They even cut off buses that have air brakes. Now, if you have any idea, an air brake will not stop by tapping it. There's a lot more to deal with stopping an air brake vehicle, such as a bus or one of the larger vehicles. They cut these vehicles off, and then whoever the prospective driver is has to figure out how to swerve out of the way or stop so they don't hit this bicycler who's not obeying the red light, not letting pedestrians walk first. I mean, it's a significant, I have so much that I'd like to
Stephanie,
work
I hear
on.
you. I hear you. And thank you for raising the issues that you've raised. I think that if you could put your information in the chat, we will, to contact you, we will move it over to Eric Coelho at Mark Levine's office and have him get back in touch with you so that we can see if there's something that can be done about your particular situation, but also the issues that you raised. Those are very city-related issues, and we'd like to make sure that he deals with them. So Stephanie, can you put it in the chat? Or whatever, don't worry about it. You know, you can also write to our website and give it to us there. So whatever works. I just want to say that Carolyn.
Laura, one last thing, sorry, Carolyn has been wanting to speak.
Yes, it's Carolyn Zayas King. Is that who we're talking about? Carolyn, are you here? Carolyn Jackson. I'm sorry, Carolyn. Can you, Ryan, we need to unmute
There we
Carolyn.
go. Thank you.
There she is.
I really just wanted to talk about the noise from the motorcycles in this neighborhood. It's deafening. We spend part of the year in a very quiet place, and it's just amazing how jarring it is. And it was never like this before, in my experience. Not only are there, you know, groups of people who are biking and making enormous amounts of noise, but just this morning there was a single biker. I don't know where they, you know, in other places, a motorcycle has some noise restraint on it. In fact, we come from a place where people are using motorcycles regularly, and they never get away with that in a rural area. And here we are in this urban area, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, somebody's taking off and, you know, gunning their engine and going around the corner. I live on the 5th floor on 116th and Riverside, and it can be deafening. And I know what people have said about the ambulances, and I'm glad to hear they're going to be toned down. But really, the motorcycles are as much of a problem, and they're not essential services. I try to remind myself when I hear an ambulance that there's a person in that ambulance and they're in need of care, and the people who are tending to them are doing good work. But I can't feel that way about the motorcycles that we hear.
Okay, Carolyn, thank you very much for raising that. That is, again, a city issue, and I think we should contact Mark Levine's office about that, because that's the police and the traffic police. And I also live on Riverside, and I certainly can understand what you're talking about. It is loud. It is horrible. Now, we also have the problem with the sirens over on Amsterdam, and that's an issue. And one of the things we did was we reached out to President Ginelli, who's the president of Morningside, Mount Sinai Morningside now, the former St. Luke's, to speak to him about it. So it's, you know, these are ongoing discussions, and I think the more pressure we lay on them, the more vocal we become about these, the greater the chances that we can impact on them. I want to move on now. I just want to announce that for those of you that used to go to the public library in the community room, there was a Move for Life class. You know, a dance sort of exercise class, and it was great. I actually went a few times, believe it or not. And I see that in the chat there is people that it's free, and if you want to go, we will put it on the website also, because the chat will close down after this. But if you look in the chat, you might want to look at it. It was wonderful. It was a great fun thing to do. A lot of good people there, and it's not too onerous, because believe me, if it was, I wouldn't be there. So, okay. I'm going to move on now. Dan, do you want to talk for 1 minute about the next steps?
Sure. I got 1 minute. So obviously I'm preaching to the choir here. Morningside Heights has a very advocacy-oriented community, and everybody on this meeting obviously has a lot of experience, more than I do. But I would say that there are specific things that we can do in order to advance. The organization is really, as I said earlier, trying to be more proactive and take more consideration of people that want to get more involved. That's how we're going to make this sustainable. We've been doing well, obviously, but we want to do more. We have to do more. Look at the challenges that we face. So 3 quick things. Number 1, please sign our petition to landmark McGiffert Hall. Number 2, please volunteer with us if you think you have the time and you want to focus on one specific thing. And number 3, you're probably already on it, but if you're not, please join our mailing list and tell your neighbors to join our mailing list. All 3 of the links for those actions are in the chat, and we'll leave them up for a few minutes so that you can go right to them. But thank you so much, Laura, and everybody on the executive committee for letting me be involved. And it's a great organization where we have great steps to take.
Thank you, Dan. And I want to thank Dan as well as our consultant, and he's really moved us forward with his know-how and his insight and his analysis and his strategical planning. So we really thank Dan. I want to thank our
not
new—
with his technical expertise, though.
No, this is better than mine, which is not, that's a very low bar. And also to Ryan Hurst, our new technical consultant. He has been terrific tonight.
Yeah,
and
Ryan.
Believe me, we have thrown a lot at this guy at the last minute. And believe it or not, he has done amazing things. So thank you, Ryan, and welcome, Ryan. I want to thank the executive committee, because you don't know the amount of work that people have to do. We're a volunteer organization. Everybody is volunteer. And it's just been an amazing experience. So thank you, executive committee. But most of all, and most importantly, I want to thank everybody that came, because without all of you, there's no way that we can move forward. We are one. And that one is pretty powerful when we're all together. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again. Don't hesitate to tell us anything you're thinking about. You can do so by going to our website at mhccnyc.org. And we hope to see you in the neighborhood, and we hope to see you again online. So thanks again for joining us tonight. Have a good evening. Stay well.
Yeah, this album is dedicated to all the teachers that told me I never amount to nothing. To all the people that lived above the buildings that I was hustling from that called the police on when I was just trying to make some money to feed my daughter. And to all my peoples in the struggle, you know what I'm saying? It's all good, baby, baby.